Hello and welcome to Harmony Hall, a sacred space for all. As we gather in peace, we will grow in our beliefs and let our spirits breathe. As we gently explore the many faiths and religions that shape our spiritual world. Harmony Hall is a place of respect, reflection, and spiritual curiosity. And today we journey to ancient Mesopotamia to explore the Sumerian religion. The Sumerian religion is one of the world's very first organized faiths. Long before temples rose in Babylon or prayers echoed in Akkad, the Sumerians laid the foundation of human belief. There, gods shaped the heavens, ruled the rivers, and breathed life into the first great cities of civilization. Around sacred ziggurats and temple courtyards, priests and priestesses served the gods through ritual, song, and devotion, seeking harmony between the mortal and the divine. Today, around the campfire, we will step inside this ancient world of spirit and story, and explore how the Sumerians began humanity's earliest conversations with the heavens. Thank you for being here today, and for choosing Harmony Hall to help you on your spiritual walk to self-discovery.
Our journey today through the Sumerian religion takes us way back. Not just a few centuries, but millennia. We land in a place nestled between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. A land the Greeks would later call Mesopotamia, which means the land between the rivers. Here, in this fertile crescent, one of humanity's first great civilizations flickered into existence. We call them the Sumerians. Around 4500 BCE, they began to build the world's first cities, Uruk, Ur, Eridu. They weren't just building with mud bricks. They were building the very foundations of what we call society. They gave us the wheel, writing, perhaps the first truly organized religion. Imagine a world without writing. Every story, every piece of knowledge had to be memorized and passed down perfectly, generation after generation. Then, something extraordinary happened here in Sumer, around 3500 BCE. They started scratching wedge-shaped marks onto wet clay tablets. It was called cuneiform. At first, it was for keeping track of grain and livestock, but soon it became so much more. It became a tool to record laws, histories, and the stories of their gods. The Sumerian civilization wasn't a single, unified empire for most of its history. It was a collection of independent city-states, each with its own patron god and king. For nearly 2,000 years, their culture flourished. They built monumental temples, developed complex mathematics based on the number 60, and charted the movements of the stars. Around 2000 BCE, a combination of factors led to their decline. The land grew salty from centuries of irrigation, making farming difficult. Neighboring peoples grew more powerful and began to conquer the Sumerian cities. But here's the amazing part. Their story didn't end. Their ideas, their gods, and their myths were absorbed by their conquerors. The essence of Sumer was carried forward, a cultural DNA passed down through the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and beyond, echoing into our own time. This was humanity's dawn. How did the first city dwellers see the universe? For the Sumerians, the cosmos was a structured, precarious place. They imagined the world as a flat disk, the Kai, floating on a primordial freshwater sea, the Abzu. Above, a solid dome sky, the An, of lapis lazuli. Below, the underworld, Kur or Irkalla. This cosmic bubble, heaven, earth, underworld, was surrounded by the saltwater ocean, Namu. This model wasn't just abstract, it explained daily life. The Abzu was the source of all life. It fed the rivers, it filled the wells, it made the Fertile Crescent fertile. Enki was master of the Abzu. The sky, An, housed the most powerful gods. The underworld, Kur, was the grim destination after death. Their universe was a three-tiered structure, a divine skyscraper. The universe wasn't accidental. It came from divine births and cosmic struggles. An-Kai, born from Namu. Their son Enlil separated sky and earth. That created space for life, the atmosphere. Violent but necessary, establishing order. Everything, the sun, the moon, the wind, the reeds in the marshes, had divine essence. This worldview was governed by me, pronounced Me. The Me were divine decrees, principles enabling civilization. Think of them as the source code for the universe. Me for kingship, priesthood, writing, brickmaking, justice, falsehood, strife, held by gods, held by cities. They could be stolen, causing cosmic disruption. Civilization was a divine gift, not a human invention. A fragile order, constantly maintained through ritual and obedience. So, who were the cosmic architects of this universe? The Sumerians worshipped a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, whom they called the Anunnaki, meaning something like those of royal blood. These weren't distant, abstract deities. They were powerful, immortal beings with very human-like personalities. They felt love, jealousy, anger, pride. They feasted, drank, squabbled amongst themselves. The fate of humanity rested on the whims and decisions of these cosmic sovereigns. They were the forces of nature personified, the unseen powers that governed every aspect of life. At the very top of this divine hierarchy was a ruling triad of powerful gods. There was An, or Anu, the god of the heavens. He was the supreme patriarch, the ultimate source of all authority, but he often remained distant and remote in his celestial kingdom. Then there was Enlil, the god of wind, air, storms. He was the most powerful god in practice, the enforcer of the divine will. He could be a benefactor, but he was also capricious and could unleash devastating floods when angered. And finally, there was Enki, later known as Ea, the god of the freshwater abyss, wisdom, magic, creation. Enki was often a friend to humanity, a clever trickster god who sometimes saved us from the harsher decrees of the other gods. Beyond this main triad, there were countless other important deities. The beautiful and formidable Inanna, later known as Ishtar, was the goddess of love, fertility, war. She was one of the most beloved and feared deities in the pantheon, the queen of heaven and earth. There was Nanna, or Sin, the moon god, who illuminated the night sky and measured time. His son, Utu, or Shamash, was the sun god, the god of justice, who saw all things that happened during the day. And then there was Ninhursag, the great mother goddess, associated with the earth, fertility, childbirth. Each major city had its own patron deity, who acted as its special protector and king. These gods were not just concepts, they were believed to be physically present in their temples, residing within their cult statues. The Sumerians believed that humanity was created for one primary purpose: to serve the gods. We were made to be their laborers, to provide them with food, drink, shelter, to sing their praises, and to relieve them of the toil of maintaining the universe. This wasn't seen as slavery, but as a symbiotic relationship. In exchange for humanity's service, the gods provided order, protected the cities, and ensured the fertility of the land and people. It was a cosmic contract, a sacred duty that defined the very meaning of human existence. If the gods lived on Earth, where was their home? The answer lay at the very heart of every Sumerian city: the temple. The temple, or literally house, was not just a place of worship. It was the physical dwelling of the city's patron god. It was the god's earthly estate. These temple complexes were vast, sprawling economic and administrative centers. They owned land, employed thousands of people, priests, scribes, artisans, farmers, and functioned as the city's central bank, granary, and workshop. The temple was the engine that powered the entire urban economy, all in the name of serving its divine resident. As Sumerian cities grew in wealth and power, their temples became more and more elaborate. The most striking feature of these temple complexes was the ziggurat. Picture a massive stepped pyramid made of mud bricks, with a shrine sitting at its very peak. This wasn't a tomb, like the Egyptian pyramids. The ziggurat was a man-made mountain, a stairway to heaven, designed to bridge the gap between the earthly realm and the divine. It was a powerful symbol of the city's devotion and a visible axis connecting the human world to the celestial one. The shrine at the top was the most sacred space, the place where the god could descend from the heavens. Life inside the temple complex was a highly organized hierarchical affair. At the top was the high priest or priestess, who served as the god's chief steward. They were responsible for overseeing all temple operations and performing the most sacred rituals. Below them were legions of other priests, each with specialized roles. Some were responsible for interpreting omens, others for music and hymns, and still others for the daily care of the god. The most important daily ritual was the care and feeding of the cult statue. The statue was washed, clothed in fine garments, adorned with jewelry, and presented with elaborate meals twice a day. This was the god's sustenance. The ziggurat and the temple complex it served were more than just religious buildings. They were the cosmic center of the Sumerian world. They organized society, legitimized the king's rule, and provided a sense of security and identity for the city's inhabitants. The king himself was seen as the chosen representative of the god on earth, and one of his primary duties was the building and maintenance of the god's temple. A magnificent temple brought prestige to the city and favor from its divine patron. It was a declaration in brick and bitumen that this city, this community, had a special place in the cosmic order. For the average Sumerian, religion wasn't something you did for an hour once a week. It was woven into daily existence. Every event, from the birth of a child to the harvest of barley. While grand rituals happened in the temple, performed by priests on behalf of the community, personal devotion was constant. Small altars in homes, clay figurines of personal gods, protective household spirits. Not the great pantheon gods, but humbler, accessible mediators like divine guardian angels. Individuals prayed to their personal god to intercede with the city gods. Daily life brimmed with small acts of piety. Libations of water, libations of beer, offerings of grain, offerings of bread, wearing amulets for protection. Before a journey, before a new business venture, seeking a favorable omen. Life felt precariously balanced under many divine and demonic forces, requiring vigilance and reverence. Festivals brought the whole community together to celebrate the gods. Elaborate, multi-day affairs tied to the agricultural cycle, tied to astronomical events. The cult statue would be paraded through city streets on a divine barge or a chariot. Ordinary people could glimpse their divine protector. Streets filled with music, feasting, celebration. Festivals reaffirmed the bond between city and God and renewed cosmic order. One major festival, the Akitu, the New Year, celebrated in spring, a 12-day festival of renewal of life and reaffirmation of divine order. In some cities, it included the sacred marriage, hieros gamos. The king would symbolically marry a high priestess. She represented the goddess Inanna. The union ensured fertility of the land, of the livestock, and of the people. A sacred drama, sympathetic magic that brought divine power into the human community, ensuring survival and prosperity. In a world governed by powerful and often unpredictable gods, knowing the future was not just a curiosity, it was a matter of survival. The Sumerians believed that the gods wrote their intentions into the fabric of the world, and that these divine messages could be read by those with the proper training. This is the art of divination. Specialists, known as Baru priests, were masters of interpreting these signs. They were the scientists of their day, carefully observing the world for clues to the divine will. The king and the state would consult them before making any major decision, before going to war, building a temple, or even appointing an official. One of the most important forms of divination was extispicy, the inspection of the internal organs of a sacrificed animal, usually a sheep. The liver was considered the most significant organ, believed to be the seat of emotion and life. The diviner would read the liver's shape, color, and markings, comparing them to detailed clay models that served as reference guides. Each anomaly, each unique feature, held a specific meaning, a message from the gods. Other methods included observing the patterns of oil poured on water, interpreting the smoke from incense, and reading the movements of the stars and planets in the night sky, the birth of astrology. Alongside divination was the practice of magic. If divination was about reading the divine will, magic was about trying to influence it, or at least to protect oneself from malevolent forces. The Sumerian world was teeming with unseen spirits, ghosts of the dead, and a host of demons and evil spirits who could cause disease, misfortune, and death. The most feared of these was the demoness Lamashtu, who preyed on pregnant women and newborn infants. To counter these threats, people relied on incantations, spells, and protective amulets. Specialist priests, the ashipu or exorcists, were the masters of this craft. When someone fell ill, it was often believed to be the result of a demonic attack or a sin that had angered a god. The ashipu would be called in to diagnose the problem. They would perform purification rituals, recite powerful incantations to drive out the offending demon, and prescribe magical remedies and amulets to prevent its return. For the Sumerians, there was no clear line between religion, magic, and medicine. They were all part of the same toolkit for navigating a complex and often dangerous cosmos, for maintaining health and balance in a world filled with unseen powers. How did the Sumerians explain their own existence? Their myths, preserved on those ancient clay tablets, give us a profound insight into their worldview. In one of their central creation stories, the gods themselves were laborers, digging out the Tigris and the Euphrates. After toiling for ages, they grew weary and complained. The clever god Enki had an idea. He proposed creating a lesser being to take over the gods' labor. With the help of the mother goddess Ninhursag, he fashioned the first humans out of clay, from the Abzu, the freshwater deep. This story reveals something fundamental about humanity's purpose. We were created to be servants of the gods. Our role was to provide them with food, shelter, worship, freeing them to manage the cosmos. This wasn't a punishment, but our designated function in the cosmic scheme. It also established a close connection between humans and the earth. We are literally made from river clay, a powerful metaphor for our connection to the planet. An earthly, humble origin under the watchful eyes of the gods. Another powerful myth tells of a great flood. Enlil, annoyed by human noise and clamour, decided to wipe them out with a deluge. Enki, who cared for his creations, secretly warned a pious king, Ziusudra. Enki told him to build a giant boat, to load it with his family and pairs of all living creatures. The flood came, raging for 7 days and 7 nights, destroying all life. When the waters receded, Ziusudra emerged and made a sacrifice, and the gods granted him immortality. This is one of the oldest flood myths, exploring divine wrath and divine mercy. It shows the gods' power to create and to destroy, and the precariousness of human life. It highlights tension in the pantheon, Enlil versus Enki. A narrative retold for millennia about catastrophe and the survival of a chosen few. Our oldest stories grapple with the same fears and hopes we have today. Perhaps the most famous story to come out of Mesopotamia, with its roots deep in Sumerian legend, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was a real king who ruled the city of Uruk around 2700 BCE. In myth, he was a demigod, 2/3 god, 1/3 human. The story begins with Gilgamesh as a powerful but tyrannical ruler. His people cry out to the gods for relief, and they respond by creating a wild man, Enkidu, to be his match. Enkidu is tamed and brought to Uruk, where he and Gilgamesh engage in a titanic wrestling match. Neither can defeat the other, and from this struggle, a deep friendship is born. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu embark on a series of heroic adventures. They travel to the great cedar forest to slay the monstrous guardian, Humbaba, and bring back precious timber for the city. Their fame grows, and the goddess Inanna herself desires Gilgamesh. When he rejects her, she unleashes the bull of heaven to punish him. But the two heroes manage to slay the bull. The gods are angered by this hubris, and as punishment, they decree that one of the friends must die. Enkidu falls ill, and after a long and painful sickness, he dies, leaving Gilgamesh utterly devastated by grief. Enkidu's death confronts Gilgamesh with the terrifying reality of his own mortality. Despite his divine heritage, he too must die. This realization launches him on a new quest, a desperate search for immortality. He journeys to the ends of the earth to find Ziusudra, the survivor of the Great Flood, who was granted eternal life by the gods. After a long and perilous journey, Gilgamesh finds him. Ziusudra tells him the story of the flood and reveals that immortality was a unique gift, not something that can be earned. As a test, he challenges Gilgamesh to stay awake for 7 nights, but the exhausted king immediately falls asleep. Defeated, Gilgamesh prepares to return home. But as a parting gift, Ziusudra's wife tells him about a magical plant at the bottom of the sea that can restore youth. Gilgamesh dives deep and retrieves the plant, hoping to share it with the elders of Uruk. But on his journey home, he stops to bathe, and a snake steals the plant, sheds its skin, and becomes young again. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk empty-handed, but as he looks upon the massive walls of his city, the work of his own hands, he has an epiphany. He realizes that a human cannot live forever, but their deeds, their creations, and the legacy they leave behind can achieve a kind of immortality. The civilization of Sumer may have faded into the dust of southern Iraq, but its ideas did not. They were like seeds, carried on the winds of conquest and trade, taking root in new soils and blossoming in later cultures. The Sumerian pantheon was largely adopted by their successors: Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians. The names changed. Inanna became Ishtar, Enki became Ea, Utu became Shamash. The core of Sumerian religion became the foundation of Mesopotamian religion for the next 3,000 years. The influence doesn't stop there. Think about the stories we've explored. A story of humanity's creation from clay by a divine being. A tale of a great flood sent by angered gods, and the survival of one righteous man in a giant boat. The story of an infant, destined for greatness, set adrift in a basket on a river. These are not just Sumerian stories, they are echoes we find in the Hebrew Bible. Parallels: Ziusudra and Noah, Sargon and Moses. Sumerian thought flowed into the cultures of the Near East, shaping religious traditions. Even our daily lives carry faint traces of the Sumerians. When you look at a clock, you see their sexagesimal counting: 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. Look up at the night sky and see the constellations of the zodiac. Modern astronomers and ancient sky watchers, ancient star maps and tablets. We still use parts of their map. Civilizations, like stars, are born. They shine brightly, then they die. But their light continues to travel across the vastness of space-time. The Sumerians asked the big questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What is our place in the cosmos? They answered with stories of powerful gods, man-made mountains reaching for the heavens, ziggurats, a quest for a legacy that could outlast death. Their answers have echoed for 5,000 years, a testament to humanity's first, heroic attempt to find meaning.
Thank you for joining me today on this sacred walk through time. Here in Harmony Hall, we gather in peace, grow in our beliefs, and let our spirits breathe, as we gently explore the many faiths and religions that shape our spiritual world. Join us next time, as we continue this journey of wonder, wisdom, and reflection, because here in Harmony Hall, all religions are welcomed and every voice is heard.